When I was starting my second walkthrough of Far Cry 2, I was planning to just briefly check how this game aged and move on to the next thing. Back in 2008, I didn't really like it and had stopped playing Far Cry 2 before even unlocking the second map. Well, 12 years later, I gave it a second chance and, it's actually not that bad. There are still a lot of things that I can criticize in Far Cry 2, but overall this playthrough went a lot better than I expected. And now I want to talk about what made me change my mind and enjoy this game despite its undeniable flaws. Usually I don't start my reviews from talking about graphics, but this time I have to make an exception. I need to clarify that this gameplay footage does not represent how Far Cry 2 looks by default. In order to get an authentic experience on my first playthrough, I always try to avoid installing mods on games that I want to review. But the visuals in Far Cry 2 are such a disaster. Assets and physics mostly hold up great, but that brown, realistic filter makes this game look so uninspiring and bland. So the first thing that I've tried to do is to fix color in this game by installing Real Africa SweetFX mode. And I'll be damned, it made a huge difference. Seriously, what the hell were developers thinking when they were making visuals in Far Cry 2 so bleak on purpose? I actually started to enjoy this game a lot more after installing that SweetFX preset. So yeah, be sure to check out the link on this mode that I'll leave in the description to this video. It's not a perfect solution, but it sure helped me in tolerating this game. Unfortunately, there's quite a lot of things that you'll have to tolerate in Far Cry 2 in order to enjoy it. This is a first-person shooter where you are taking the role of a mercenary who arrives in an unnamed African country and gets caught in the middle of a civil war. After a short intro, you'll find yourself on a huge open map, where you can get missions from two main factions or take contracts on the side. As a reward, you are getting diamonds that you can spend on new weapons and upgrades for them. The gunplay in combat is probably the best thing about Far Cry 2. This game keeps the right balance between difficulty and fun. Every weapon handles differently and has a satisfying punch, and stuff like fire propagation makes every encounter unpredictable and entertaining. The main problem of Far Cry 2 is everything between those fights. The open world is lacking in meaningful side activities and offers only repetitive checklist tasks, like scouting guard posts and hunting for briefcases with diamonds. The latter was especially annoying for me because I was bad at reading those goddamn signals from the tracker. And there is no real point in wasting time on all this stuff unless you want to buy and upgrade every single gun that is available in this game. But since there is a weapon carrying limit, you'll probably just stick to a few guns that will match your preferred playstyle and never touch other equipment. And even though I was mostly ignoring side activities and focused only on main missions, I always had more than enough diamonds to upgrade my current guns and occasionally unlock new stuff. When you talk about this game, it's impossible to forget about weapons decay and malaria. Those two things were seen as the biggest nuisance by most of the players, but personally I didn't have much trouble with them. During my whole playthrough, I did only 4 passport delivery missions and always had enough medicine to quickly deal with sudden malaria attacks. As for the weapons, I just get used to replacing them in the closest gun shop after almost every mission, and in my experience the only weapon that has ridiculous reliability is the dart rifle. Compared to other sniper rifles, it was exploding in my arms just after 30-40 shots, which was barely enough for a single mission. It's also strange that there's no shooting range, or at least an option to test new guns right in the storage room, so I had to go back and forth when I was trying to decide which weapon to take on the next mission. The world of Far Cry 2 is beautiful, especially after installing that Real Africa colors fix, but it doesn't feel like a real place. Outside of armed goons on every corner and a few peaceful animals like zebras and chickens, there is no other humans or creatures that you can meet around the map. It's not just about the lack of civilians. African continent is known for its predators, like crocodiles and lions, so I find it strange that those animals are missing in Far Cry 2. It's like a huge playground that has an incomplete set of equipment. You notice that something is missing just because of its scale. Developers probably knew about this issue, and to fill this void, they decided to keep the player busy all the time. The amount of fights in Far Cry 2 is just ridiculous. It's like the game is afraid to leave you alone for more than a minute. There are guard posts almost on every crossroad, not to mention armed vehicle patrols or that constantly cross your path. It's impossible to just ignore them and drive forward. Enemies will start chasing you down even if that's just one dude in a civilian car. Trying to clear those outposts is pointless as well, because guards will respawn almost instantly once you leave the place. Despite the fact that you can fast travel by using bus stations, you'll still be forced to drive around the same places and guard posts over and over again. Yeah, it's possible to avoid most of the unnecessary fights by driving off roads or using boats, but it's still a chore to navigate around the map. I think that adding an option to fast travel between safe houses could have helped in improving the pacing of this game, and also give more motivation to the player to explore the map and unlock them. Since in the PC version you can use a quick save function at any moment, I visited safe houses only when I needed to get a new task from my buddy. I can understand if some people would prefer to not use fast travel at all, but having an option for those who don't want to waste time on this definitely wouldn't have hurt the game. Speaking about safe houses, Far Cry 2 has a so-called buddy system, which is one of the main features of this game. Buddies are the other mercenaries that you can meet during your adventures, and if you are in trouble they can show up and save your ass. Every time you accept the mission from the faction, they will call you on the phone and offer an alternative way to do your task. It's an interesting idea, but most of the time it just adds additional steps to your mission, which means more tedious driving around the maps that you would rather avoid. I find this whole storyline structure a little bit weird, because you are constantly making trouble to every faction and even kill some of their leaders, and yet they just keep giving you new missions like nothing happened. The plot in this game is playing a strictly functional role, with one-dimensional characters and a lack of interesting twists. Well, there's one surprising moment at the very end of the story, but that's not enough to redeem this forgettable mess of badly connected events. Far Cry 2 tries to justify the weak storyline by following the paradigm of emergent gameplay. You are basically given a direction to the next target, and then you are free to decide how you are going to complete the task. The problem with this approach is that you can complete the game simply by driving directly to the next waypoint and mindlessly killing everyone. Most of the available missions are very limited in scope and ask you to do the usual steal, kill or destroy types of jobs. So if you don't have a desire to figure out on your own the new ways to deal with tasks, playing this game will soon become a tedious and repetitive experience. This is a common problem for all games of this type, but in the case of Far Cry 2, the lack of solid world building and limited selection of enemy types gives you fewer reasons to experiment with the gameplay. At the same time, it's clear that developers put a lot of effort into trying to make the player's experience more immersive. In Far Cry 2, they've tried to integrate some of the parts of the user interface right into the game's world. Like, you have to literally pull out the map and look at it. I love that you can see the direction to the next missions on the road signs, even though this feature can be buggy sometimes. As someone who prefers to play games without a HUD, I really appreciate all this effort, but I think they didn't go far enough with the interface, because stuff like mission details, journal entries and info about your buddies are hidden in the pause menu. I also didn't like that GPS and vehicles for some reason doesn't show some of the icons, like guard posts and bus stations. Lack of consistency in everything except the combat is the main problem of this game. Despite the open structure of the map and illusion of choice, Far Cry 2 is a very linear game. You can't side with one of the factions and help them to achieve a total victory. The game forces you to work with everyone in order to progress further. After introducing the player to the sandbox gameplay, a few times Far Cry 2 suddenly tries to take everything back into the linear course. One such example happens soon after you arrive on the second map. Yes, I'm talking about this absolutely atrocious mission where you have to defend the cargo boat from scripted waves of enemies. It's like developers couldn't decide what type of games they wanted to make, so Far Cry 2 stuck somewhere in between linear and open-ended gameplay. Personally, I think this game could have been a lot better if they dared to go all in with Emergent gameplay design. Focus entirely on faction wars, maybe allow the player to join one of them or either help the resistance to fight back, full-on guerrilla warfare. That could have eliminated the dissonance between story and gameplay parts, so there was no need to occasionally restrict the player for sake of the plot. A huge missed opportunity, that's how I see this game. Back in 2000s, Ubisoft Studios had no experience in creating engaging sandbox gameplay. I feel that they've probably tried to make a truly open game, but then they realized how hard it is to make the player keep having fun when he's not restricted by level design all the time. In that way, Far Cry 2 reminds me Stalker franchise, another overly ambitious FPS series that tried to break the rules of the genre. I'm currently making a video about alpha versions of Shadow of Chernobyl, so I have real examples of difficulties that you can face while trying to get rid of linear set pieces completely. And unlike Stalker devs, Ubisoft Montreal didn't have 6 years to make a game, so they were forced to go with what they had and then try to fix it later. And while they indeed solved most of the major problems of Far Cry 2 in the next games, I feel that some of its important aspects were missing. This game feels completely different from other entries in this franchise. It's more immersive and tries to offer something unique to the player, even though it's not always doing it well. Far Cry 2 is an amazing concept that was poorly executed, but all this doesn't mean that it's a bad game. It's definitely not for everyone, and it's not the best Far Cry game in my eyes, but if you'll be able to tolerate all those unfortunate design mistakes, it's a fun game to occasionally mess around for an hour or two. Technically wise, it aged fine for a 12 years old game, and on the PC version you can enhance your experience with mods and high frame rates. I only discovered a few visual animation glitches at the beginning of the game, but for the rest of my playthrough I haven't noticed any technical issues. If you're looking for an FPS game that is not afraid to offer something different and has great combat, then Far Cry 2 will be a good choice. It took me around 12 hours to complete it, and I think it's a fair deal for a few bucks that it costs on sales. If you have never played Far Cry 2 before and after watching this review you are planning to give it a try, here's a quick summary of things that helped me to enjoy this game. Take shortcuts via off-roads and rivers. Ignore diamond hunting. Don't hesitate to replace your weapons in closest gun shops. Do passport delivery missions only when you have the last malaria pill left, and play the game in short sessions. Hopefully those tips and SweetFX presets that you can find in the description to this video will help you to have more fun with Far Cry 2. Thanks for watching and stay safe.